Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, Israel pivots from Gaza and doubles down on the West Bank.
It's the Israeli military's biggest operation in the occupied West Bank since the start of the new year.
With Donald Trump in the White House, what does this mean for Palestinians in the occupied territory? I'm Kevin Hurton, and this is The Take.
The situation inside is very sad. That these people have socially, financially, they are destroyed. They have no one to defend them. They have no one to support them. The Palestinian Authority is trying to destroy them as much as Israel is. And it's not just about Jenin. If it's Jenin today, it will be at the rest of the West Bank tomorrow. My name is Zainat Tahan. I'm a Palestinian journalist. I'm based between occupied Jerusalem and the West Bank. I've been covering Palestine mainly as a print journalist initially, and then now I'm also doing TV videos for social media and things like that.
Well, welcome to The Take. You've been busy reporting from Jerusalem and the West Bank, and we're catching you today in between live shots. So there are other reporters that might be heard in the background, but that's because you're very busy. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Zaina, following a year and a half of horror for Palestinians, earlier this week, people were out in the streets of the West Bank celebrating this ceasefire, but the mood has quickly changed.
Israeli military vehicles were seen raiding Jenin refugee camp after an airstrike on a car.
Israel launched a deadly campaign on the Jenin refugee camp in the north of the occupied West Bank. Mm-hmm. Can you just start by getting us up to speed? What has been happening there this week?
Yes. So let me say, first of all, before we talk about the Israeli military assault that began on Tuesday, the Jenin refugee camp had been under a siege for over 40 days by the Palestinian Authority. Now, Jenin is known for decades. It's been a bastion of armed resistance. And even though over the past 2 decades, Israel and the PA kind of managed to deconstruct that state of armed resistance, we saw since 2021 a reemergence, and not just in Jenin. We saw it in other cities. It quickly spread to other cities in the occupied West Bank, including Nablus, Tubas, and other areas. So Jenin, the Israeli army turned to it 2 days after the ceasefire. People didn't have like a second to just breathe and for 1 day not see Palestinians being killed or Palestinian blood being shed.
Fadi Saadi's brother was walking in the neighborhood when he was shot and killed by Israeli forces.
He went to get bread from the shop nearby. He was shot by a sniper.
Dozens of other Palestinians have been injured, including children.
So the fact that it started 2 days after the ceasefire, when people were finally had a moment of relief and of just like, feeling that they can go to sleep at night, knowing that they're not going to wake up seeing hundreds of Palestinians massacred, or horrific videos of their bodies being eaten by animals, and everything we've seen over the past 15 months. So the Jenin refugee camp was under a siege by the PA, and now the Israeli army has gone in. And so far, they've killed in the past 2 days 12 Palestinians. The first day, 10 of those were killed. 10 of those people were killed in the first day. The people there are being attacked by 2 sides. One of them is one of the most advanced armies in the world, the Israeli army. And the PA is basically a police state that is funded and supported by the EU and by the US as a way to basically keep people in the West Bank, to keep them pacified. The PA's role is administrative. It has no rule in the occupied West Bank. They only have an administrative role, or they are out arresting people that try to fight Israel. So the idea that the Palestinian Authority is trying to prevent Palestinians from their own choice to resist Israel is in itself, like, for people, hard to grasp.
Yeah, there's always been a fraught relationship with the Palestinian Authority, but what you're talking about is it sounds truly remarkable. Is that fraying even more than it has in the past?
in the past few days, what we've been seeing is people saying that this is a joint operation by the PA and Israel. The fact that Israel is striking the camp while the PA is there. I mean, we've always known that there's security coordination, and that's in the DNA of the PA, of how it was structured and why it was created in the first place. But both of them attacking at the same time, this is a first. And it's extremely, extremely worrying, Kevin.
Yeah. Yeah, Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, said on Wednesday that the Jenin operation marks a shift in Israel's military plan in the occupied West Bank, and that they're applying, quote, lessons from Gaza in this operation. We've done a lot of episodes in Jenin in the past, but does what's happening there now feel different to you?
Yeah. How quickly they went in. It's like they were preparing for this. They have been preparing for this for ages. The fact that they are creating like evacuation corridors out of the camp, it's like resembling what's happened to Jabalia, northern Gaza. And they are interrogating people, 5 people at a time, families, sick people. They're pushing people out of the camp, and let's not forget that Palestinians in the Jenin refugee camp are displaced and their infrastructure is ruined. And it's like non-stop Israeli raids that have really made it impossible for people to keep living there. And they have nowhere else to go. These are 1948 refugees and their descendants. All the Palestinians living in refugee camps have remained in these camps since 1948.
Can you talk a little bit more about Jenin for people who just might not know the context here? How it's become not only a center of Palestinian resistance, but also a symbol of that resistance, and why that makes it a target.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll give a little background, and then I'll talk about more recently what's happened. So Jenin, since the second Intifada between 2000 and 2005, it was one of the main areas from which armed operations would emerge during the Intifada, which was mostly an armed Intifada, as opposed to the first one, which was mostly non-armed. After that, we saw the PA was created, and Israel completely destroyed all the infrastructure of the PA in Jenin and in other areas. And they totally removed the weapons and everything. Now, since 2021, and particularly around the events of Sheikh Jarrah, which took like international attention, around then, we started to see a reemergence of very limited armed resistance in areas like Jenin, Nablus, Tubas, in the northern occupied West Bank. These young men, they're mainly they're between 18 and up to 30, but the majority of them are in their early 20s. Many of them would save up and then buy their own rifle with their own money. Like it's on a personal initiative, because they feel like they have no future. They also feel like there is no political horizon. The interesting thing about these camps is that it's a very community-led initiative. So you'd see things like that are not about armed resistance, but they're about putting obstacles in the face of the Israeli army to make it more difficult for them. So the community itself in the camp put up canopies all over the camp to cover the fighters from the Israeli planes and warplanes. They also put surveillance cameras all over the camp, and this is people's personal community-led initiatives. They also created their own, they call them hedgehogs, that they used in, I think, World War II. They stopped the military vehicles from coming in. And every time when an Israeli raid on Jenin ends, you will see all the entrances of the camp be blocked again within minutes. Like everything is set up all over again.
As we sit here today, thousands of Palestinians have already been displaced there. The United Nations is warning that Israel's ongoing attacks have left the Jenin refugee camp, quote, nearly uninhabitable. I mean, when you bomb a refugee camp, where are refugees supposed to go? And that's what I want to ask. We're talking about families. We're talking about children. Where are they now? How are they staying warm?
Yeah, I mean, every time that they have to leave their homes, they either find somewhere to rent, or they find family members, or they find people who just open their homes for them to stay. But it's always temporary. They always return. The nice thing about Palestinians is that you won't see anyone sleeping in the street anywhere. Even though people's situation here are so difficult, you'll never find homeless people. Someone will take them in, always. And I think that's what keeps people strong. And they know that Israel is trying to turn the camp against the resistance, but the resistance is part of the camp. These are the sons of the families of the camp, in the same way that Hamas are the sons of the families in Gaza. They're not separate from the Palestinian people. They are a product of the Palestinian people.
More with Zaina Tahan after a quick break. So, Zaina, as we broaden the lens, let's talk about some other issues. One of the first executive orders from U.S. President Donald Trump was to lift sanctions against violent Israeli settlers in the West Bank. Now, I know settler violence has been on the rise in the West Bank, but are we seeing any direct implications since the signing of this executive order? Has it already increased violence?
I can't say firmly that the increase in violence is tied to Trump removing the sanctions, but obviously for the settlers themselves, it's a green light for them to do whatever they want. Settler attacks is one of the most important issues, Kevin, in my opinion. I think that the West Bank is coming to a very difficult phase, and specifically the villages. The villages are on the front lines of these attacks because there is no PA, there is no kind of defense, and they're very alone.
And Israeli settlers have carried out more attacks on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. Witnesses say dozens set on fire Palestinian homes and businesses in the towns of Fandak and Jinsafut, east of Qalqilia. The Palestinian Red Crescent says 12 people were injured.
Every single Palestinian city, every village, every town is surrounded by Israeli checkpoints, by huge illegal settlements, and obviously that comes with army military infrastructure to protect the settlers.
They're like castles.
Exactly.
They're like castles on the hills. Yeah.
Exactly. Every village is fighting its own battle, as we saw in Beta. Remember, save Beta, save Sheikh Jarrah, save Khan al-Ahmar. Every one of those had to fight their own battle. They have been saying for years, every time I've gone, they've been saying, we want protection, we need protection because massacres are coming. And the residents know that massacres are coming, and they know, there's no way to defend themselves. So actually what's interesting is that you're seeing young men at night just gather and try to defend the villages from settler attacks at night. They don't have weapons, but they try to confront and block as much as they can. And you kind of have these nightly units that are basically observing and keeping an eye on the village.
Hovering above all of this is the threat of annexation. Trump's pick for the UN ambassador, Elise Stefanik, agreed in a congressional hearing that Israel has a biblical right to the West Bank, which echoes the rhetoric of far-right Israelis. At the same hearing, asked whether Palestinians have the right of self-determination, she did not give an answer.
I asked you in my office also about whether Palestinians have the right of self-determination. My understanding was you said yes. Do you have a different answer today?
That was not the direct question that we discussed. I said the Palestinian people...
You believe that Palestinians have the right of self-determination?
I believe the Palestinian people deserve so much better than the failures that they've had from terrorist leadership.
It's just a pretty simple question.
So with the Biden administration, there was at least this kind of pretext of restraint. Is annexation something that Palestinians are starting to talk seriously about, especially if Trump gives the most radical impulses of this Israeli government a completely free hand?
I would say analysts are talking about it, but people on the ground, like Kevin, you have to understand that there's a de facto annexation in the occupied West Bank. We're already there. The Israeli army has full control all over. The settlers have civil rights. The Palestinians do not. They live under military rule. And if Israel annexes the occupied West Bank, they're not going to give the Palestinians Israeli passports, nor do the Palestinians want Israeli passports.
Right.
So the situation is going to remain as it is. It's going to be Palestinians living in these cantons and these Bantustans under military rule, and it's all under Israel's control. The PA, will we see that? I think that's a question. Is the PA going to stay? And maybe we're going to go back to how it was before the PA, which is direct military occupation, where if you need anything to do with civil affairs or papers or birth or whatever, you need to go to the Israeli army, not the Palestinian Authority. We may see Israel destroy the PA and just impose like a direct military occupation. But in terms of annexation, we're already there. We're talking about more than just 18% of the occupied West Bank that doesn't have settlements. That's nothing left. There's nothing. People are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed.
As we wrap up, since Israel's war on Gaza began in October 2023, hundreds of Palestinians in the West Bank have been killed. Thousands have been wounded. And that was when the focus was Gaza, right? Now we're in this new phase. There was a headline on AlJazeera.com this week that said, "Deadly West Bank attack mirrors military action in Gaza." That's a scary headline. Do you get the sense that people are preparing themselves for at least the possibility that this gets really bad in the West Bank, that what Israel has planned is something at scale, something that, as the headline says, does mirror military action in Gaza?
Yeah, I think that people are very afraid. I don't think they assume that it will happen quickly. I think they know that this is a long-term plan. They know Israel's goals are to kick them out, either kill as many Palestinians as possible and push out as many Palestinians as possible. I think that throughout the 15 months, people were going through ebbs and flows of fear, where they would go out and like buy everything in the supermarket, buy tons of flour. That happened at least maybe 6 or 7 times throughout the war on Gaza here in the West Bank. So yes, people are very afraid. I can't say that they think that it will be the same amount of destruction as Gaza. I think it will be hard because obviously Gaza was a prison. It's a concentration camp where they can do that. Here it's a bit more difficult. It's larger area and other factors. But definitely they believe that there is mass displacement coming for sure.
And that's The Take. We're always listening to what you think of the show, so let us know what kind of episodes you'd like to hear more of and what you thought of this one. We do read the comments, so go ahead and put your thoughts below, and we will check them out, I promise.